welcome to today's show where I will be reacting to a viral YouTube video where one progressive took on 20 Trump supporters. But before I unpack this 90-minute showdown, I want to share some great news about the show. So instead of just doing one episode a week as originally planned, I'm actually going to be now shooting and releasing 2 episodes per week. So you will still get that Sunday large unpacking episode. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to release on Wednesday a midweek mailbag. So what that is just questions that you guys, my audience submits, or just different questions that I've seen. It could be conversations that I had with different people, but I'm going to basically be answering questions on Wednesday. So if you want to submit your question, you can submit it in a variety of ways. You can comment on YouTube videos. You could follow me on Instagram and write me there. That is at TJacks Unpacks. Or you can email me, and that email address is tjacksunpacks@gmail.com. Email is the best route to go if you want your question to remain anonymous. So if you want your question to be anonymous, just let me know in like the body of the paragraph, and I will be sure to bring that question to air. So exciting announcements there, kind of expanding the number of episodes per week. And I would be remiss if I did not shout out my wife for making this all possible. As you guys know, with my nursery, I have a newborn, and she is often taking care of a lot of the load of watching him while I'm able to record this. So just want to share a special shout out to her for this. Now, I'm going to jump into the video breakdown and kind of explain what the situation was in case you guys have not seen the video. It is 90 minutes, so I do not blame you if you don't or have not, but I do encourage you to watch it if you do have the time. Maybe you want to listen to it on ×2 speed. But it has over 3.5 million views as of last check. I'm sure that may be up much higher at the time you were watching this, but it was hosted by Jubilee, and the setup was basically one progressive. And this progressive was Sam Seder. If you guys don't know what a progressive is, it's basically the left-wing flank of the Democratic Party. You may have heard people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Bernie Sanders. That is considered like the progressive caucus of the Democratic wing. So Sam Seder shares a lot of those ideologies. I do as well. So for instance, I believe taxes should be increased on the rich. He shares that ideology, robust climate policy, universal health care. You guys hopefully get the idea. If you're not sure about a lot of progressive policies, you can go online. I'll put the link in the description for the Progressive Caucus so you guys can go and view some of those policies. But he was basically surrounded by 20 different Trump supporters, and he came to the table with 4 different topics. And these topics would be debated for 20 minutes. And when the topic was presented, basically people would rush to the chair. The first person who touched the chair got to sit down and speak, and they basically were able to stay in that chair debating the progressive in the middle, Sam Seder, until they were voted out by a majority, which in this case would be 11 people since they were 20 Trump supporters. Now that you guys have the layout, I want to start with big takeaways, and then I'm going to look at each of the 4 kind of sections of questions, and then they actually finished with a 5th section, which I'll talk about at the end. All right, so my biggest overall takeaways. First and foremost, it takes some either bravery, you can look at it with some individuals / fame seeking, to sit in and be able to share your thoughts on a stage on a platform this big. You guys, if you watch, you can determine for yourself which individuals were more just brave, and which just seemed out there for clout and to make a name. But I know for me, in my perspective, if I ever get invited on to do something like this, it would take me a quite deal of bravery as kind of an average person to go and do that. So I just want to shout out the format and people for being willing to participate in it. But bigger takeaway is, guys, we're in an age of drastic misinformation and a poorly informed electorate. If you identify yourself as a Trump supporter and you watch this, I hope you were embarrassed by it and that it's not representative of, at least in your mind, the Trump kind of base because there was just endless misinformation. So some examples, they didn't, a lot of the participants, or at least the participants that were shown, because keep in mind, guys, they can't show everything. I'm sure it was much longer than 90 minutes. But not knowing how government agencies or Social Security is funded, not knowing constitutional rights, not knowing what diversity, equity, and inclusion actually means, which is actually going to lead me into the first topic that Sam Seder put up, which was Trump's attack on DEI hides his real goal, which is to give corporations more power. I 100% agree with this claim, and I'm going to kind of spoiler alert. I've already told you I agree with a lot of progressive policies, so I'm going to agree with every claim he makes that he brought to the table here. The reason I know, or the reason I agree with this statement is because Trump doesn't even know, or this administration purposely, potentially, could be some purposeful ignorance, but diversity, equity, and inclusion has zero to do with hiring unqualified people, because of their background. No, that is not what diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI has anything to do with. Guys, DEI has things to do with like closed captionings to help people who are hearing impaired, right? Wheelchair access. So maybe like a veteran who was wounded in battle who can't navigate steps can access areas. Sign language interpreters, right? Handicap spaces in parking lots, changing tables in bathrooms so families can change their toddlers and their infants, things like that. It's about including everyone in society. In the workplace, guys, it would just be reaching out to make sure like low income applicants are aware of the opportunity. It is not hiring unqualified people. And I think Sam did a very good job of explaining this, but the problem is the Trump supporters weren't able to like come to the understanding of their interpretation of just unqualified hires is not at all what diversity, equity, inclusion is about. So it was kind of a hamster wheel, but Sam was 100% correct with his definition, and the Trump supporters were not correct. You guys can look up diversity, equity, inclusion, and read for yourself what it actually is about. But this talking point, like it goes beyond, guys, just they don't know what it is. It becomes incredibly dangerous because the Republican Party is attaching this acronym onto anyone who is not a straight white male who disagrees with them. So, for instance, Amy Coney Barrett. I am no fan of hers. You can look up her voting history. She voted down Roe v. Wade. Not a fan of hers at all. But she did recently vote across, I guess, party lines, although the Supreme Court theoretically should not be partisan. We're well past that. But she voted alongside the more liberal judges because voting basically that USAID payments still needed to be made because it was already appointed. So it was constitutionally correct, but immediately, because she was a female, I saw nonstop DI hire, DI hire, DI hire, DI hire, right? Kamala Harris, guys, whether you agree or disagree with her politically, I think she could have done a lot of things different in the campaign. And I'm definitely further left-leaning than her. To call her unqualified is insane. You can disagree with her, but to call a serving vice president unqualified and her career track record of public service and to call her unqualified, that, guys, we're reaching a really scary point where anyone who does not agree and is not a white male is called a DEI hire. I am very troubled by that. We need to call it out. Guys, that's not what DEI is. And once again, I think Sam Seder did a very good job of attacking this. Now, I want to play my first clip for you that shows this individual. He's talking about the diversity, equity, and inclusion through the lens of, once again, unqualified hires. but it's clear he is not fully aware of his constitutional rights. But I'm gonna go ahead and play this for you, and we will reflect afterwards.
First of all, DEIA means that if you come into this agency or corporation, you're not going to be discriminated against because you don't look like everybody else, or you don't have the same like physical abilities as everybody else, or you may require handles on the bathroom or whatever it is. That's what DEIA does. But does it make a government better if there's a broad representation of the people it's supposed to govern? Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Regardless of DEI, don't we already have things in our Constitution that protect people's rights, protects people?
No.
We don't?
No.
Do we or do we not?
No, we do not. Tell me what protects people from discrimination in housing and in work and hiring or getting loans. It's all statutes. It's all statutes. And in these government agencies, there was nothing except for that order. That's why Trump just rescinded it.
I'm gonna tap out.
All right, I will preface this by saying I obviously don't know any of these people personally, and it's hard to really, like, in such a short clip, you know, put too many qualifiers or like put people in different buckets. You don't know in such a short clip. But I am not that upset with this individual because as someone who watched it, compared with a lot of the other participants who were also incorrect on the facts, he seemed to be able to be reasoned with, and you can kind of see it there. He wasn't sure, and he was asking for confirmation. Now, as a fellow black man, it hurts a little bit more that he wouldn't know that anti-discriminatory statutes, I guess, are not embedded in the Constitution. Could have phrased that better, but I think you guys get my point. But I don't think we should rip this guy too much because my perception of him is he is open and he came there wanting to have a legitimate debate and learn. He didn't come there to chase clout or like become popular with one-liners. Now, I could be wrong. Don't know this guy, but that was my take on it. Now, that is completely different than my take on this next guy, which if you have not seen this clip yet, pour yourself some kind of beverage of your choosing and strap up and prepare yourself for what you are about to see.
Listen, we're talking about government agencies that do not get tax cuts. Government agencies.
They don't.
No.
Yes, they do. They absolutely do.
I'm talking about
every private and public sector gets tax cuts when you hire a person of color.
Government agencies don't pay taxes. Government agencies are funded by the government.
That is not true. That is not true. And you know what? I think the whole juxtapose of this entire conversation.
What month is this?
This is January.
Okay, so we can agree on that.
So guys, you can see, I think, the compare and contrast between the two different people. This person was like brashly and arrogantly incorrect. Like, to have that level of confidence in something and be that wrong is astonishing. And I don't really know how to, I guess, convince people otherwise who are that adamant about their misinformation. Whereas the guy previously, I think he could be moved with the proper information presented. I am not sure with the level of like arrogance it seems the second guy has, if that would be the case. Now, I don't know, once again, don't know him personally. Maybe he got corrected and learned a little bit, but I think those two can be put into different categories in terms of their reaction. But once again, both lacking information. And that was a lot of the theme throughout this. Now, we are going to move forward to the second claim that Sam Seder put forward, which was, unless you're a billionaire, religious fundamentalist, or a xenophobic nationalist, voting for Trump was a mistake. And what I found very interesting about this part is no one inherently disagreed with him. So what happened more so in this kind of segment is that religious fundamentalist part, that is what kept getting hit home mostly, but they weren't disagreeing with his claim. They were just saying it's not a bad thing. And all Sam was saying is unless you're part of these, I guess, 3 different groups, it was a mistake. But they came up and basically identified as religious fundamentalists and were happy about what was happening, which kind of, in Sam Seder, the progressive in the middle, he kept saying this, you're proving my point. Things are going great for you. So it was kind of like a weird just point of agreement. So Sam's basically conceding, yes, like we're agreeing on the same thing. And the Trump supporters weren't really able in the video to identify a group outside of those three who would benefit. They were just kind of supporting his point ultimately. Now, what I do want to say is I do think one individual, one of the Trump supporters, made a good point, but I couldn't clip it for you guys because it was really long and convoluted, and I thought it'd be better for me to explain it and make it a little bit more concise. And I think this is the point he was trying to make. He was basically trying to make the point that you can derive laws, etc., from, and your sense of morality from religious text, and that's not inherently wrong. And you can use that to develop your belief system and ultimately develop laws. Now, guys, I generally agree with that. And Sam Seder didn't handle this fully well, I thought, in the moment. But let me explain this. I do not care, guys, whether the origin of a policy or a law that benefits people comes from a religious text or someone randomly thinking of it when sitting on their couch one day. That is irrelevant to me. What's relevant to me is the policy going to benefit most of society? And I don't care if that policy is coming from a religious doctrine or not. My issue is we need to be nuanced, which in today's state of politics, I think that's lacking, but we need to be nuanced and look at each individual policy that you're trying to ascribe case by case. So for instance, like we're going to get to this at the end, I believe in a woman's right to choose. So if you don't, and your religious text is telling you that is an area of right? That's a debate area. But once again, I don't fundamentally care where a policy comes from as long as it is good for the people. But that was a point where objectively I thought the Trump supporter looked better. But overwhelmingly, I think that was really the only good part you can say through this whole debate for the Trump supporters. And then he ultimately undoes his point, in my opinion, in this next clip.
Do you have a problem with gay people being married?
It's not that I have a problem. I just don't see a justification for why they ought to be gay outside of it just feels good. Can you give me another justification for it?
Well, I think maybe that's the way they were born.
I was kind of left speechless by that because I have never heard that line before. And I am left thinking that, like, some people believe that we are born and our, like, identity or sexual identity is like a game of Pokemon where we get, like, you get the choice between the fire, water, or grass, and you get to choose, and then, like, you need to make the correct choice. That seems to be the mindset. Whereas, as Sam said, guys, people are just born different ways. Like, and to discriminate against someone and limit their rights based on how they're born is ridiculous. Just like, gay people did not choose one day, yes, I decide to be gay. We did not choose, or I did not choose one day, yes, I want to be straight. Guys, people are just born that way. So, and he made it even worse. And I actually cut this part off because I didn't even want to play it. But he eventually tried to equate pedophilia and incest with being gay or being homosexual, which I hope if you're watching this, that disgusts you as much as it disgusted me coming out. It disgusted me coming out of my mouth, because the first two clearly have a victim. It was a really disgusting line that he went down. So he started with like a reasonable argument that was like, oh, okay, good point. And then it immediately just spiraled where I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So he completely undid, I think, a quality point he made by going so extreme. But ultimately, guys, and I'm considering doing an episode of this, I am really curious to explore, as someone who's not religious myself, I want to explore the intersection a little bit more between religion and politics, because I think right now what I do know about religion is I'm seeing a lot of hypocrisy between what people are voting for and what the text says. But that is something saved for later that I would love, like I said, to explore a little bit more. Let me know in the comments, guys, if that's something you would listen to. Now, we're going to move forward to the third issue that Sam presented, which was the GOP will destroy Social Security and healthcare. And one thing that was clear here is the supporters were not really fully aware of how Social Security was funded. So that was something that was very clear to me. And like, part of me, guys, once I said, I think it takes a level of bravery, but at the same time, I would do more research if I knew I was going to be on camera. Like for the episodes I produce on Sunday, I do hours and hours across days of research. And it seems like, I don't know, they should have been more prepared with the facts. But I think overall, this section was really eye-opening because I think it painted the biggest picture of the difference in the mindset of humanity for progressives versus Trump supporters, or at least the ones in these video guys. There's only 20 of them, so that, there's millions of Trump supporters. So the 20 that were in the video. I find myself thinking that the Trump supporters who think people who rely on social safety nets, so things like Social Security, are like inherently lazy, or they're inferior, or they didn't plan well enough for the end of their life. Whereas the progressive approach, I know my approach and what Sam was trying to communicate is like a more passionate and empathetic view. And not only that, but just a more like practical view. So one of the things, like Sam mentioned, is if you take away Social Security right now, or let me phrase it this way, Social Security keeps 2/3 of our elderly or senior citizens out of poverty. And he was explaining like human behavior, you may want people to save, and I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm going to kind of dismantle that in a second. But like, what if they don't? And the Trump supporter mindset was like, I don't know, just let them suffer, basically. And that, I think, is the inherent like difference in mindset. I don't want people to suffer for like really almost any reason. Now, obviously, there are extreme examples, but he seemed to be fine with suffering and doesn't believe that we need social safety nets. Now, I think a lot of you understand this reality. People can work hard their entire lives. They can have 2 jobs, 3 jobs. They can work 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week, and still need Social Security and other social safety nets to survive. That is the truth of the country we live in. Our economic situation is out of control. Prices of housing is out of control. Childcare is out of control. Groceries are out of control. And we have crazy income inequality and wealth inequality where a lot of people can't even afford a $400 emergency. So to kind of, cast people who rely on Social Security in this net completely ignores the reality of the United States economy right now, and the idea that people don't have thousands and thousands of spare dollars to put away in a savings account necessarily for the end of their life. They are just trying to survive paycheck to paycheck, and many people therefore have to work honestly up until the day they die, which is a crazy situation. My position, the progressive situation, is that Social Security is part of a safety net that can help you in addition to your retirement fund. And this is another thing, and we're seeing this right now with the stock market struggling. If you eliminate Social Security and you rely on things like 401ks, then if the stock market tanks and you go to retire, you're screwed. You have nothing else there to help you. So once again, if you watch none of this clip, I would watch that third talking point, the GOP will destroy Social Security and healthcare. And I don't think anything more crystallizes the different view of human behavior and the reality of like what people are living through from the progressive viewpoint versus at least that Trump supporters viewpoint. Guys, Social Security works. It's also self-funded, so it cannot like collapse tomorrow unless every working citizen who pays into Social Security magically like Thanos snaps away. What we need to do to get 100% of the benefits and continue it, or even increase the benefits, is to just lift the cap. And what lifting the cap means is taxing people at the same, I believe the rate is 6.2%. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think it's 6.2% that you pay in, and your employer also pays 6.2%. But that is capped at $176,000. So we have all of this extra money that could be, taxed for people making millions, but they pay the same amount as that cap. So that can be a very easy solution. Tax the rich more, and this whole Social Security fiasco is solved. But either way, guys, it is still going to be there for decades to come. It's just like, are we going to fall for the trick we can't afford it? Or are we going to come together, realize it's a beneficial program, tax the rich proportionately at the same percentage as your income grows, so that it is available for everyone to take advantage of for generations to come. What I did like about this section at the end is Sam Seder pointed to the child tax credit being raised during COVID, and that was an overwhelming success. It brought millions of kids out of poverty, but then it elapsed and it basically was not brought back into action, or it went back down to the previous amount.
We cut child poverty in 1 year by 45%. By 45%, but because no Republican would join the Democrats, and Kristen Sinema and Joe Manchin voted against this provision in Bill back. I'm talking 2021. From 2021 to 2022, we cut child poverty in this country by 45%. Look it up.
I feel like when I look at it,
I guarantee you, I will give you my phone number. You call me, and if I was wrong.
All right, we'll call.
I'll do it off camera.
That was an amazing moment because A, it was true the way Sam presented it, and it proves, guys, that government safety nets and government program and government spending does work, and it is effective when done correctly. The people who often say it's not effective are the richest amongst us who don't want to have to pay their fair share, and they don't want that money going to the average American. So always pay attention of who's telling you we can't afford things. It is often the millionaires and billionaires lying about that. Now, moving on to the final claim that Sam Seder made, which was Trump's policies make the rich richer and the working class poorer. In this section, I thought it was kind of the weakest in terms of debate because there was not a lot of substantive policy talk here. There was a lot of mixes, but like not understanding the difference between correlation and causation, for instance, and just a lot of inaccuracy, once again, misinformation regarding inflation. But I do want to shout out Jubilee for fact checking in real time. I think this should be a universal policy. When there are debates, there should be, when possible, when you have the infrastructure to do so, fact checking. And nobody should have a problem with that. In fact, if one of the sides or someone has an issue with fact checking, that is a red flag that they want to lie with impunity and say whatever they want and get away with it. But we should, when possible, have fact checking. And I love that during this Jubilee consistently had kind of a fact checker on the right-hand side. But in this section, one supporter did parrot the kind of line about drilling to fix the economy. And guys, drilling more does not fix the price of childcare, for instance. But in fact, actually, drilling more will disproportionately benefit like our oil barons that we have, the oil tycoons. Because guys, we already produce endless oil, more oil than any country in the world. And what do we do with it? We sell it so that the oil tycoons and the oil companies can just make more money. So if we produce more oil, the rich are inherently just going to get richer. And maybe our gas goes down a little bit, but it doesn't address the wide scale economic problems we are facing. And guys, if drilling had zero negative effects, okay, I would be all about it, right? It would create more jobs, sell it, try to actually have a system set up where you're paying your employees equitably so we do not have vast income inequality. But guys, drilling is causing endless harm to the environment, to the world we live on, to our future generations and our current generation. The question goes far beyond money, but more so the impact that our actions are having on society and the globe at large. And like, this person seems to either ignore that fact or honestly think it's not a big deal, which is inaccurate. But nonetheless, let me play this clip and so you guys can be the judge for yourself.
So you want to go beyond even the record-breaking thing?
Yes, I
Are
want to
you
become
aware
energy
of
independent,
climate?
and that lowers inflation.
We're going to
which
sell
makes
this
the economy
oil.
better.
We don't use the oil. We sell
Yeah, we're gonna-
it.
yeah,
we sell
getting
it.
money in the
We
pockets of
sell
American
it.
citizens.
We sell it. Well, how is that oil getting to the pocket of American citizens?
Because when you lower the prices of oil, that lowers the prices of
No,
all
I
products.
understand. I understand that the
you
inflationary
transport
effect of energy, but the fact of the matter is, they're just going to sell it.
Yeah,
They're
we're
not
gonna be-
they're
we're
not
gonna
gonna
be-
sell it.
yeah, so we're gonna
You
be-
want to produce even more oil than we are
Right,
now.
yes.
And you don't think climate change is going to impact? You don't believe in climate change?
Well, that's a whole nother discussion, but no.
Well, I mean, it's sort of the same discussion.
Yeah, no, I believe that climate change is, well, there's obviously an element of climate change that is partially true, but lowering or
Which
raising,
part of it?
Raising the man-made raising temperatures by 1 to 2 degrees Celsius in the next 150 years isn't necessarily a detriment to society. Human beings
You don't think so?
No, human beings are very good at innovation, and we can build seawalls, and we can create carbon
What kind of
technology.
seawall are you going to build for Miami?
One of the things that is so incredibly frustrating with our elected representatives' inability to act on climate policy is the earlier we act, the less extreme measures we would have to take to combat climate change. Because we are not doing anything, and in fact, we are, under this administration, we are likely going to accelerate the climate catastrophes that we are going to see. It is just, we're going to have to make more drastic changes down the road to combat the damage we are doing now. Whereas if we just stopped and passed things like the Green New Deal, we wouldn't have to make the drastic changes we're going to have to make down the road as communities are continually wiped out with climate disaster after climate disaster. So the very last section, guys, of the video, of the debate, whatever you want to call it, Sam was actually able to pick just one of the 20, and then that person came up and they debated one topic for 10 minutes. I think it was chosen by the person who Sam picked, but it wasn't fully clear about that. And the topic they picked was abortion is immoral and should be legal. Now, I am definitely pro-choice. But I always find this topic complicated to debate because this argument isn't really based on science and logic when there's a disagreement. It's more based on empathy and feelings, and a lot of times like religious foundation, which is a lot harder to debunk than like a tax rate and how that impacts the working class, right? I think also just in general, men need to do a better job of understanding how difficult pregnancy can be for women, and not just if it goes perfectly fine, because that is still detrimental enough and difficult enough. But like a lot of times when there are difficulties, the woman is left bearing the difficulties of that pregnancy, at least physically, emotionally. Like your husband could be there too, or your partner there too, in being supportive. But often like it could be the man's DNA that is causing the problem, but the woman still has to bear that difficulty with the child. And I think there are so many women and families out there with stories like that. And it is not their responsibility to inform men about that, right? Because that's their personal information. Who they choose to share that with is up to them. But I do think it is incumbent to be a little bit more conscious and aware of the difficulties, like I said, of pregnancy and childbirth. And ultimately, I believe that decision should be left up to the doctor and that specific family for what they decide to do. Because you know, it is that woman, it is that woman, it is their body, and that choice should not be stripped from them. And that's really my take on that. I can do a longer episode on that if you guys feel. But overall, I found the last 10 minutes, not that it's not worth debating, but like I said, because it's so much based in like empathy and feelings and emotion rather than logic and fact. The last 10 minutes were kind of a little bit back and forth for me. But overall, I've watched a few of these, but I haven't watched in a few years. I do like this format in terms of just hearing different ideas. I think we benefit as a society from hearing different viewpoints, but I think having 20 is too many. And the reason is you're left with inherently people who I think either don't know what they're talking about or they're there for their social media moment, right? I would much prefer for someone who actually wants to hear the issues talked about, doing one versus like maybe 3, 4, or 5, and really let the conversation kind of, I guess, breathe a little bit more rather than having people kind of running up and maybe having some people there who can't defend their points that well there. So that would be my only critique, but I do plan on watching some of these in the future. I think it is good content. So that wraps up my reaction, guys. I am interested to hear what you think. So if you did watch the full 90 plus minutes, I think it was 90 plus minutes on 2 times speed or regular speed, let me know if you agree or disagree with some of my points. If not, if you didn't watch the full thing, let me know what you think about some of my analysis based on what you saw here. So that wraps up this episode of TJacks Unpacks, where I broke down the viral video of one progressive versus 20 different Trump supporters.